As dusk settled over France's rolling fields and a cold rain began to tap dance upon them, Thomas found himself in an unfamiliar muddy expanse under a grey sky not unlike his own back home. The distant roar of celebration carried on the wind a stark contrast from the sombre mood. That evening, as he sat beside his simple yew-bow beneath the canopy of ancient oaks at Agincourt, awaiting what fate had in store for him and thousands like him during this relentless struggle. Thomas's village back home was a quaint little place where time seemed to move with leisurely steps, a far cry from these muddy fields that now lay heavy under the rain's persistence, turning into an impromptu zero-yeary of his own disquieting journey. The English and French had been at odds for nearly a century over claims by kings to lands across the sea. It seemed no end was in sight as Thomas remembered tales told beneath starlit skies back home about distant wars that shaped their world, but none ever fell so near real until now. The cold rain mingled with his breaths as he thought of friends and loved ones tucked safely away from the coming storm, a cruel reminder of what was at stake on this night, where every drop seemed to carry weight beyond its mere existence, heavier than lead in a knight's armor. His thoughts often drifted back just enough for him not to sleep amidst his fellow soldiers huddled together as if sharing warmth and solace against the coming cold of battle that lay ahead with dawn's first light. Thomas had always been drawn to the simple strength in bending wood, a skill passed down through generations, or craftsmanship he learned from his father, who taught him how fingers could coax life into material meant for protection and precision by pulling back an arc of tension before releasing it with intention. But never had he imagined this bow would serve as both shield and defense, or blade against the French, nor that its twang might echo through history on fields strewn not just with fallen bodies, but tales worth telling to generations yet unborn who sought understanding beyond what books alone could teach them about strife and survival. His hands moved mechanically now as he checked his arrows, each one a promise of precision, the fletching trimmed by fingers that had once played in meadows back home where life flourished unburdened by war's shadow. He knew well enough not to look upon this field with longing for tranquillity, but understood it was here his purpose would be tested, not just of body and skill, but the spirit within him as he embraced a role larger than himself in something that had claimed so many lives already without yielding an easy resolution. The French night's festivities faded further away into memory with every droplet of rain falling upon his face, or cold reminder from nature itself, mimicking the chill he felt within as thoughts turned to family and future alike, which were now just whispers in a distant land. As Thomas settled deeper beneath his coat's warmth against the damp earthiness that clung like an unwelcome blanket around him, another thought crossed his mind. This is not what home looks or feels like, or stark realization of how far he had ventured beyond familiarity into a world where honor and survival were intertwined with each other. He closed his eyes for just a moment longer to envision the warmth that once filled these fields, imagining children playing under sun-kissed skies in innocence now overshadowed by necessity's call, which drew him here amidst this grim tableau where hope clung as desperately as moss in perpetual rain. The distant sounds of the celebration turned to nothing but a memory, and with it his sense of longing for home waned against visions of what lay ahead of battle that would not be won by sword alone nor by might untested, rather through courage worn into one's bones like calluses from years spent honing skill upon the yew bowstring. Heeding to a whisper in his heart, Thomas found solace within knowing he was but one thread among many woven tightly together on this tapestry of war, a small part that would join another day's tale as surely as it joined today's relentless downpour and the steady drumbeat against earth beneath which signaled an uncertain dawn. And with a deep breath he rose to meet his fate, not just in this moment, but across time itself, an English longbowman whose mark would ride on wind-borne feathers into eternity. The air lay heavy with the scent of wet earth and green foliage, as if to mimic Thomas's own burdened heart, or bowman caught in a relentless season that refused to yield its hues. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon when he found his way back home after another day spent amongst men who seemed like spectres of their former selves, warriors adrift from purpose and peace alike. Thomas's village lay nestled in a valley where once laughter echoed freely through generations, now hushed by an unspoken dread that clung to the stones themselves as moss does an omnipresent reminder of times when bloodshed had been but whispers on battle-ground winds. Upon his return he was greeted not with warm embraces or stories from afar, but by solemn nods and eyes that bore the weight of untold sorrows, as if their souls were etched into every line upon a weary face. His mother's hands trembled slightly when she reached for him, yet her fingers wrapped around his arm with an assurance born not only from love but necessity, or lifeline thrown across vast and uncertain seas of fate, where each man was both the castaway and captain aboard life's vessel, through times darkened by conflict. Inside their modest home stood a fire that struggled to breathe against autumn's chill. Flickering shadows darting across wooden walls, lined with family portraits whose gazes seemed eternally fixed upon the present moment or silent acknowledgment of loss and endurance. His father's chair remained empty by the hearth, where his presence had once warmed not just bodies but spirits, a void that echoed within Thomas like an unstruck bell resounding through silence before dawn breaks. But even as night enveloped them in its comforting shroud of darkness, and stars mirrored their own fleeting hopes upon the campus above, his mother's voice rose softly with tales spun from threads both real and imagined, tales that wove a tapestry where courage was not only found but lived. In her stories lay strength for Thomas to draw on when he returned once more under skies of fire-forged darkness. In each word the reminder that even amidst destruction there existed beauty enough to hold back despair's encroaching tendrils. At daybreak his father's boots would follow him out into fields where dew lay upon every blade like a thousand tiny jewels reflecting nascent light as it pierced the veil of night, or prelude to battles fought on distant soils that called forth men with names unspoken aloud. In his heart Thomas felt an affinity for this land, where green was not just seen but lived in every blade and brook, a stark contrast against blood-soaked fields afar which bore the hues of loss. He would never touch nor fully comprehend her grim palette on foreign lands that remained mere echoes to his own. The village blacksmith had become an unlikely confidant as Thomas shared tales with him beside fires stoked in earnest and good company, their conversations a balm for the raw edges of reality carved into lives by war's cruel hand or life, where every man's worth was measured not just on bravery but resilience. The blacksmith spoke often of his sons who had gone to arms with hearts as unyielding as he himself, and how even when the clangor ceased upon their departure or return, it did little more than silence an absence that rang louder in Thomas's ears each time a hollow metal ring signified completion. As night embraced him once again within his bedchamber of solitude at home with tales, whispering like spectres through the crevices between dream and waking world, he would close his eyes to let visions transport him beyond this memento days when fields were filled not just with blooming flowers but innocent smiles. And in those moments, suspended within time's embrace, where memories danced like phantoms at twilight, Thomas felt an Armoire 01T3 expression of resolve stirring deep within him to hold fast against the coming trials or determination that would not waver even as his own hands were forced into mastering new bowstrings and sharpened arrows under skies once familiar now harbored omens. His training was relentless, each day a step closer to becoming an extension of the woodland himself, or sentinel whose aim would one find as night wrapped its velvet arms around him once more within his bedchamber of solitude at home with tales, whispering like spectres through the crevices between dream and waking world. Thomas closed his eyes to let visions transport him beyond this memento days when fields were filled not just with blooming flowers, but innocent smiles. And in those moments, suspended within time's embrace, where memories danced like phantoms at twilight, he felt an unwavering expression of resolve stirring deep within himself to hold fast against the coming trials or determination that would not waver even as his own hands were forced into mastering new bowstrings and sharpened arrows under skies once familiar now harboring omens. His training was relentless, each day a step closer to becoming an extension of the woodland itself, or sentinel whose aim would one fine spring morn become as true north for him as it had been guided by stars and seasons before his transformation from blacksmith's son into that which nature herself seemed to call forth. In this new life he learned not only with hands but also the language of leaves, rustling in hushed tones above a dialect spoken without words yet understood fully through touch and sight alone, as if each blade knew him by his own heartbeat's echo across its tender green flesh. It was a time when evenings bled into dawn, where shadows stretched long past the hour of resting sunlight, to linger in corners, that whispered secrets only heard at nightfall, secrets Thomas yearned to share with his beloved Elizabeth, who remained ever faithful by his side through seasons, and wore alike. Her presence had been a balm, soothing salve on wounds both physical from battles fought upon fields now silent under the weight of time's passage. Her absence still ached in ways that words could scarce convey, her constant reminder etched into Thomas's soul like runes carved by ancient hands. But as he trained, his eyes would catch glimpses between movements across meadows where children frolicked free of concern for the morrow's uncertainties. Their laughter rang clear against a sky that held more than just stars, but promises too vast to fathom in one lifetime. He found solace therein, even as his own heart ached with knowing such simplicity could never again be fully reclaimed amidst an age where steel and smoke foretold omens of strife instead of sprouting seeds, or the gentle kiss upon a lover's brow at dusk's embrace. Each stroke he honed on new bowstring spoke volumes not just about his skill but reverence, a pact made with every fibre that curled beneath calloused fingertips to protect life as fiercely now within these woods cloaked in twilight's spell where time stood still. The woodland creatures, small and great alike, became silent witnesses of his journey. Their eyes mirrored back the resolve he sought not for glory, but simply because it was necessary, the lifeblood pumping steadily within him as if dictated by nature's own rhythm that demanded sacrifice before complacency. The first time Elizabeth took her place beside Thomas at his side, their hands joined over bow and quiver of arrows to stand vigilant against threats unseen yet palpably felt through every trembling leaf upon the breezy union born not just out of necessity, but love that would weather trials as persistent as time itself. Together they stood guardian between humanity's edge and nature's own. Understanding in silent accord their roles were pivotal to a world teetering on balance, for every arrow loosed into the air was an act intertwined with hope of preservation rather than devastation, or promise made not just by themselves, but all who would listen. Within these woods, where once echoed only hammers and anvils, Thomas now found harmony in symphonies played out across rustling canopies, a cadence that spoke lessons of humility amidst might as he learned to be both guardian angel for those who would not stand against the coming storms. His heart became attuned like an instrument, itself a string vibrating with empathy, resonant in its capacity to feel what others could scarcely comprehend beyond their own fear and loss. A melody that sought neither fame nor conquest, but simply existence within these hallowed groves where every breath whispered tales of ages past. As Thomas stood sentinel beneath the watchful gaze of ancient oaks whose roots delved deep into earth's memory, Thomas found himself at an impasse as he gazed upon a delicate form nestled among ferns, its soft fur like threads of morning mist caught in sunlight's first caress. The creature before him was both alien and familiar, a tangible embodiment of the forest's silent plea for coexistence. It carried within itself an innocence that demanded a guardian not just out of duty but from pure affection, as though their destinies were interwoven with threads invisible to human eyes. A soft rustling sounded behind him, and he turned slowly. An old woman emerged like the ghostly figure conjured by tales told in hushed tomes around campfires deep within these woods. Her attire bore patches of sun-bleached cloth, remnants of a time when humanity had not yet learned to take without offering back. Her presence was as much an intrusion into his solitude as it could be seen through the lens of guardianship forged by fate's hand. "I am Alara," she said with weathered lips, and Thomas felt a spark that seemed misplaced in such tender moments, a recognition not just of her name but an ancestral connection he couldn't yet comprehend. It was as if the forest itself had conspired to bridge their worlds. Their meeting beneath these very oaks unfolded into dialogue, where words wove around each other like vines embracing a trellis of shared understanding and respect for life's intricate patterns. The old woman spoke not just with her voice, but through the law passed down to her from one generation to another. She had come upon these woods, as Thomas would have years later, searching within them. Both found solace in silence that often carried more wisdom than any crowded city could offer, and an unspoken kinship bloomed between guardian soul and forest sentinel. Alara shared with him tales of ancient times when the earth was young, a world where rivers flowed pure as crystalline tears, trees whispered secrets to those who would listen without judging or commanding their stories back. A time before sorrow turned into whispers and hope became but echoes in forgotten caverns. She spoke of spirits that danced with the shadows, At twilight's edge, when stars blinked open eyes across vast, velvet skies, a reminder to Thomas that life was not just about surviving against odds or standing firm as sentinel, but thriving in ways unseen and unfelt by those who walk blindly through the world. As night embraced them with its gentle cloak of darkness, stars began their slow dance above. Alarur's tales turned into stories that painted pictures across Thomas' mind, or tapestry woven from memories not his own, but shared like a communal blanket to keep him warm against the cool breeze. They spoke until dawn peeked over horizon's edge, and with each story told in hushed reverence of forgotten law that hummed through every leaf quivering beneath their breathless words. Forest itself seemed to breathe a sigh of contentment, as if it too had been listening closely. When morning light finally broke the horizon's hold, Thomas found himself alone with Allura once again, standing among ancient oaks and whispered secrets that now felt like fragments of his own heart. A realization dawned upon him not just in silence, but through a symphony composed by nature itself. He was no longer merely human within these woods. He had become part of something far greater, as though the very essence of life flowed between them, unbidden and unfaltering, with each shared tale and silent understanding that grew stronger than any stone or steel could ever aspire to bear, bond sealed by trust in an uncertain world, where hope was a fragile bloom fighting against encroaching frost. Through the day, as he walked back through familiar paths now viewed with fresh eyes of wonderment and gratitude for being chosen for such guardianship, Thomas carried within him not just memories, but promises made in whispered reverence and oath to these woods, that his heartbeat would be theirs too. For every footprint left upon the earth was a note added to an eternal song of existence, and as he returned home under star-strewn skies, Thomas no longer just felt like part human, but more elemental, for in this sacred place, where nature spoke volumes, without uttering a single word, understood that his purpose had always been not simply about being guardian or protector. It was to live harmoniously within these groves, so he might learn their symphony, and by doing so carry forth the message of balance between humanity. Thomas learned to listen not just through ears, but within, and his soul resonated more profoundly with each whispered secret shared between earth and sky as spring reclaimed dominion over decay. It was in this season that he encountered a fellow guardian of old and elder, whose presence had always been like an echo from the past to Thomas's present self since their first silent communion beneath those very same trees now older than memory itself, leaves turning green with youthful vigor once more as they stretched towards sunlight. Their reunion was not marked by grand declarations, but a subtle nod of acknowledgment that spoke volumes in the language known only to these guardians and their sacred home, a covenant renewed under spring's tender care, where life's frail bloom pressed forward defiantly against frost. It became Thomas' task, not just with nature, but within himself as he embraced his place amongst its cycles, a steward of growth and decay alike, since the world beyond those woods remained blissfully unaware that their survival depended on delicate balances such as these being upheld. Yet, even in this unyielding commitment to guardianship lay Thomas's own transformation, or metamorphosis of spirit from a mere keeper into an elemental part and parcel of the very essence he pledged himself to protect, his humanity intertwined with that which was wild and free. With every season came revelation, summer's blazing zenith, where Thomas felt closest not just in spirit, but fleshly kinship as life reached its vibrant peak, a time when the woods themselves seemed imbued with an almost sentient ardor for existence, their very essence alive and pulsating around him like ethereal wraiths of verdancy that danced to sunlight's rhythm. The symphony Thomas had come to learn it was not just a harmony, but a dialogue between mankind's footsteps on nature's back, their echoes resonant in the sacred place where his heart now beat with every rustle of leaves and burble of streams that flowed down ancient paths as if narrating tales from eons past. He understood then he did not merely guard or protect, rather it was to coexist within this grove so harmoniously, forging a bond between mankind's aspirations and the inherent wisdom held in every root, branch, and creature that called these woods home, a message of balance scribed across time by nature itself. But as autumn's amber hues returned to paint his parting gaze upon civilization from afar, Thomas carried within him not just memories, but promises made under the star-strewn canopy, for he knew that one day he must return and share this wisdom with others who could learn its secrets. He felt a profound sense of duty, as if imbued by these woods themselves a legacy to uphold beyond his own life's span, an elemental calling whispering through him like the rustling leaves, beckoning for perpetuity in cycles unbroken and interwoven with every soul's journey. With each setting sun that bade farewell behind distant mountains or upon horizons kissed by dawn's first light, Thomas became more than a man among trees, was an embodiment of the very essence he sought to preserve, his spirit intertwined with ancient pact made in silent reverence beneath those eternal woods. And as night's velvet cloak descended once again upon him and around him, cradling dreams yet untold within its folds, Thomas lay down not just on the ground that had become familiar like an old friend, but also into his own heart, where he carried forward a legacy of harmony between humankind's touch and nature's embrace. For in this sacred place, where silence spoke volumes without utterance, it was clear Thomas understood now more than ever the profound truth that had always, as Thomas lay there beneath the ancient oaks and whispering pines that had been his silent mentors for years uncounted, he felt a deep connection to every root woven through the soil like threads of fate entangling around him. Each breath washed over him by the night breeze seemed guided towards tranquillity. With eyes gently closed and mind open wide as the sky above that tapestry where dreams could freely dance untainted, he listened to an internal symphony that resonated with a harmony only nature's choir might compose. This was his music, born from understanding life's delicate balance between growth and decay. The knowledge bestowed upon him by these wise woods had become more than just lessons. It flowed within like lifeblood through veins pumping with purpose to every living heart that beat beneath the same celestial dawn as his own now silent one. It was a gift he intended not only for himself, but also bestowed upon others. And so, when morning light would soon kiss him awake and once again cast its golden thread through the intricate loom of daily existence, he knew that this sacred wisdom must find new guardians to carry forward into generations yet unseen, a legacy intertwined with time's relentless march as indelible upon memory's canvas. In his mind, Thomas envisioned himself not standing alone, but amidst many heirs of knowledge, next stewards who would walk the same paths under these trees that had cradled him in their boughs, those souls with hearts open to listen and minds eager for learning as though drinking from a river fed by an unending spring. These future bearers, each unique yet connected through shared reverence, would be his legacy if he were but a whisper on the wind that rustled leaves in ancient arboreal dialogues. They would carry forth this essential bond between mankind and Mother Earth as Thomas had come to understand it so clearly now. Such thoughts wove themselves into dreams, where visions of future scholars gathered around him, each one a reflection of the potential held within all who sought kinship with nature's wisdom, their faces alight with curiosity untamed by age or expectation, as if they were children at play in gardens yet to bloom. In these dreamscapes Thomas felt an ever-deepening gratitude that had no bounds nor limits, set forth from his humanly conditioner feeling of belonging not only within the woods themselves, but also among all who would come after him, a sense of unity with life's grand design as he lay embraced by soil and spirit alike. As morning approached, its light painting hues across skies Thomas had watched for generations unfold from his vantage point upon this sacred earth, knew time was an unconquerable river flowing ever onward, yet within him burgeoned a belief that the ripples of one life could indeed touch countless others in waves both seen and felt, like echoes through chambers vast beyond comprehension. And though his physical form would soon return to dust, as all things must, thy soulful essence he bore was eternal, an ever-burning flame fueled by the stories of leaves that had fallen before him across seasons, turnings and whispered secrets carried on zephyrs, their voices now a part of his own heartbeat. Thomas closed his eyes once more as night's guardians took hold against their watchful embrace, not unlike those he felt when first finding solace among these trees. This was the cycle that bound him to them and all life in turn, an eternal dance of ebb and flow where each being played its part. The stars above were silent witnesses, as they always had been throughout his days spent learning from nature's unspoken wisdom, fair distant twinkling, a lullaby for the soul that needed no words to convey peace or understanding, their presence comforting in constancy and predictability of patterns across time's ever-turning wheel. And when at last morning came with its golden fingers ready to stroke him awake from this reverie, would rise as he had always done before, his actions guided by the unspoken promises made beneath these very boughs that reached heavenward, aspiring toward realms beyond mere mortal sight. It was a life lived in quiet service of understanding and teaching what wisdom nature shared freely with those willing to learn its language or journey without end, as eternal as love itself. For within the heart's chamber, where knowledge lay nestled like seeds waiting only for water in which he had come to find his own truth. For Thomas, this sacred place was not just a forest, but also, and as Thomas awoke, with sunbeams filtering through his curtains, casting patterns on his face that mimicked leaves in dappled light, he remembered how each dawn brought him back to this forest sanctuary, where time seemed suspended among the ancient trees, their gnarled roots like hands holding secrets of ages past. Today's journey would take him deeper into nature's heart as Thomas sought out a particular clearing known only in folklore, said to reveal truths about life and love when first light touched its sacred stones beneath the canopy. It had been years since he felt such an urge within his solar calling that beckoned him beyond mere acquaintance with nature's ways into a communion of spirits bound by silent understanding, transcendental whispers carried on morning breezes, through intertwined branches and swaying grasses. Thomas had learned to read the language of leaves, rustling above his head, as if they were pages in an unending book written not with letters, but feelings or tone richer than any that adorned human shelves, holding wisdom beyond words yet expressed eloquently through existence itself. He found comfort knowing he was never truly alone during these excursions. The forest and its denizens were his silent companions who understood him without ever needing to speak or even make a sound or symphony of life played out in quiet harmony, where each rustle and chirrup held meaning as significant as any uttered phrase. The scents that wafted through the air reminded Thomas of seasons changing. Crisp autumns hinted at impending winter with an earthy aroma tinged by spicy undertones of decay, while blooming spring carried freshness on its breath like morning dew, promising renewal. Today's quest had been inspired not just by his love for the natural world, but also by echoes from within those whispers that danced across Thomas' mind every time he lay beneath these very boughs, their patterns as familiar and intricate as fingerprint designs on ancient pottery. He would listen intently to what they had in store this day. His heart was an open book penned by the hand of nature itself, for narrative that unfolded with each sunrise over verdant canopies where secrets slept among roots and dewdrops, awaiting discovery only at dawn's first light. The clearing he sought came to him unexpectedly, as Thomas wove through thickets lined by trees, whose trunks bore the scars of history marks that spoke volumes about resilience in a world where impermanence was often mistaken for finality. Yet beneath their rugged exteriors lay an enduring strength born from countless seasons, weathering storms and drought. It felt almost as if each tree knew Thomas' soul through its own story of survival or shared history that bridged human to nature with invisible threads spun by the wind itself when it whispered names long forgotten into leaves like a litany against oblivion's threat. Reaching this hallowed ground, where legend said stones bore inscriptions from ancestors who once sought wisdom as he did now, Thomas paused before them and felt an immediate connection or communion of spirits across time that transcended spoken language or even the silent dialogue shared with Flora along his path. He knelt down to touch one cold, mossy stone whose surface was etched not by human hands, but carved through eras as though it were born from this earth itself. A tactile conversation between past and present began, a timeless communion where every vibration in the air carried messages untranslatable yet deeply understood. As he sat cross-legged, Thomas closed his eyes to better feel rather than see what secrets lay hidden beneath layers of time embedded into stone. His fingers traced grooves and impressions that told tales not through words, but via emotions or chronicle etched in energy, where love was as tangible here amongst the stones underfoot as it had been amidst human faces over countless generations. He recognized a familiar sensation, like discovering an old friend's handprint on his own skin. This connection to history felt less about uncovering facts and more about touching upon shared heartbeats that resonated in harmony with the forest itself, a rhythm as constant as life's pulse. The air was filled not just with anticipation for what Thomas might find, but also a sense of being part of something larger than himself. He felt an intricate tapestry, where human and nature were threads interwoven inseparably, each relying on the other's strength of dance as old as time that continued without as Thomas settled deeper into his contemplative reverie among these ancient stones and whispering trees. He felt a gentle tug in his spirit or call to journey forward, yet remain anchored within this sacred space of communion with bygone souls. He rose softly from the grassy knoll where shadows danced playfully at dusk's brink, drawing him forth toward an old oak that stood guard like a silent sentinel over countless secrets buried in its roots and trunk alike. This grand arboreal being had witnessed many such seekers of truth as he. Thus it seemed only fitting to continue his journey here amongst the towering pines, whose needles rustled with the sound of shared histories and hushed breaths. The forest path wound its way around a nearby babbling brook, its waters clear, but for occasional silt that spoke of more recent tribulations upon which no human tongue could commentate or interpret accurately. Here Thomas understood in his core the transient nature of existence and how even rivers eventually reach an end. Yet, as he meandered through this living museum underneath canopied sky lanterns, where dappled sunlight-kissed moss-covered stones with warmth that belied their age, felt not a sense of loneliness, but rather the comforting embrace of continuity and interconnectedness. As he came to an open glade, Thomas found himself standing before what appeared to be yet another ancient stone structure. This time it was adorned with intricate carvings that seemed almost alive in their complexity despite being silent monuments now untouched by human presence for millennia. With reverence and the softest of footfalls upon lichen-laden earth, Thomas approached these weather-worn sentinels whose shadows stretched long before him like elongated fingers pointing towards an everlasting future, a stark reminder that while he may be but a transient guest in this world's vast tapestry, for hours on end or perhaps all the way until dusk surrendered to night's embrace, Thomas continued along paths less trodden by modern feet. Each step felt like retracing steps of those who had come before him, of ancient hunters and gatherers seeking sustenance from nature's bounty as freely offered. As he ventured deeper into the heart of this primordial woodland, it became evident that his purpose was not solely to uncover artifacts or decode cryptic etchings upon stone, but rather to reconnect with a continuity so profound and palpable within these sacred bounds where every leafy whisper held stories waiting for ears willing enough. At the stroke of midnight, when eventide seemed hesitant in its passage across this threshold between worlds, or shimmering portal materialized beneath an ageless moonbeam, it beckoned him forth with a siren's call to realms beyond his earthly understanding, but within which he felt no trepidation. He crossed the invisible boundary that lay before him, and as if through some celestial keyhole into another era where ancient spirits might still roam, found himself standing in an ethereal clearing illuminated by starlight filtered through interwoven canopies above. This was a place of dreamscape potentiality. Here, amidst the glowing flora and crystal-clear waters, Thomas sensed that history's heartbeat pulsed with an energy so pure it transcended temporal constraints or resonance, felt deep within his bones, as if he were but a thread woven into this living mosaic, where past met present in endless harmony. This was the sacred grove of eternity, untouched by human hands, yet intimately linked to every soul that had ever sought refuge or respite beneath these trees, or testament, not just to resilience, but also an invitation for all who would listen closely enough and with a genuine heart open themselves up. As the first light of dawn began its slow ascension into daybreak's embrace, Thomas felt he had returned from whence his spirit embarked upon this pilgrimage or journey through time that started within himself before reaching outward to touch an echo across centuries unbound by linear progression. He took one last glance around the mystical expanse of verdant wonder and whispering leaves. With a heart now lighter than when he began, Thomas retraced his steps back along this hallowed path, where every stone bore witness not just history but humanity's enduring dance within its shadow, or timeless communion that continued as surely as the turning earth beneath. As night retreated and dawn stretched her rosy fingers through his dawn's first light gently caressed the edges of night away, Thomas found himself once more at the threshold where his journey began, to ancient stone circle that had promised him insights beyond time itself on a day much like this one years before. He paused to trace patterns in the cool soil beneath with fingertips still clad from sleep's embrace, and took an introspective breath, letting it echo among these sacred stones as his own history melded into their eternal tale. The air was crisp, carrying whispers of a time when this place had been trodden by countless feet, a pilgrimage site for seekers just like him who sought answers in the silent language written on weather-worn stone and intertwined with nature's own intricate designs. Thomas closed his eyes. Memories flooded back, each one a piece of this larger puzzle he felt compelled to solve since arriving here years ago under an urgent whisper from fate itself, an encounter that had led him on the path through history and heartstrings alike. His journey commenced in earnest upon meeting Elena at last within these very stones, her presence as hauntingly familiar yet utterly foreign to his own life's storyline just moments prior when he first discovered this place hidden from modern maps by the sheer force of its timelessness. The two had delved together into secrets that time dared not forget, but which now seemed crucial in understanding where Thomas truly belonged, if at all within a world so rapidly changing around him. Elena's insights spoke to his soul. Her voice was the key unlocking doors of perception he had never realized were there, doors leading back through time and forward into possibilities yet unfolded like petals in morning dew, each revealing a new layer beneath this ancient site. They traced lineages intertwined with these stones, as if they themselves might have stood upon them eons past. The revelations that followed made Thomas wonder whether he was not merely journeying through history, but also discovering his own ancestral roots within interconnection to lands and lives both lost and lived in this very grove. With every step, with each stone touched by countless hands before his own, a piece of the puzzle clicked into place as Thomas felt himself partaking not just in history, but participating actively alongside those who had shaped it through acts now whispered to him from within its heart-beaten echoed chamber where humanity's enduring dance with nature and time was reverberated back at them. It became clear that his pilgrimage here sought more than the understanding of a single event or era. He found himself seeking answers about identity, purpose, belonging in an existence so intertwined yet often disjointed by modern life's cacophony against which silence and solitude offered respite for contemplation. As evening waned into night's retreat once more on this particular morning after his profound encounter with the past within these stones, Thomas found himself at a simple wooden bench nestled under an old willow tree, its branches heavy laden and whispering secrets of ages long passed through its rustling leaves. He paused here as he had so often before since arriving on this sacred ground. Yet tonight felt different, for the revelations Elena shared were not mere echoes but clear messages to his very core, revealing threads that wove themselves into personal truths and universal connections alike, ere convergence of individual destiny with humanity's collective soul. The bench bore witness as he unpacked a small satchel containing mementos from the journey, an old locket holding whispers not just of family, but also tales that had traveled through time, encapsulating love and loss entangled in its very design, a reminder to him now more than ever before. Thomas pondered these tokens with a reverence he hadn't known for himself until then. They held the essences of lifetimes lived within them as much as his own heartbeat, connecting through lineage and legacy like roots, seeking water in soil rich beyond measure or imagination, or bond not just to ancestors, but also kindred spirits who had sought solace here before him. As he reflected on these revelations intertwined with the whispers of ancient stone guardians that watched over this grove, Thomas felt a kinship blossoming within his chest, as surely as spring's promise beneath winter's retreater sense, not just of self, but also of being part of something far greater than he had ever known. The stones hummed with history and the very essence of continuity. Their presence was both comforting in its permanence yet exhilarating, for it suggested that every action underneath an indigo sky painted with twinkling stars that mirrored Thomas's own hopes and dreams. He sat on a time-worn bench in a secluded grove where whispers of history seemed to rustle through every leafy branch above him. The cool night air carried the scent of earth, or testament to seasons past and those yet to unfurl beneath its embrace. It was here that Thomas, with his heart aching for understanding beyond himself, sought connection and shared humanity's enduring legacy. As he settled into a comfortable silence broken only by distant crickets serenading the night, an old locket lay nestled against his chest, a relic inherited from generations before him that now seemed to hum with stories untold and emotions unfelt until this moment of awakening. He traced its delicate engravings. A pattern emerged resembling interlocking hands, reaching out through time, binding the essence of his lineage in golden filaments, threadbare yet strong as they clung to hope's silken fabric. A gentle breeze whispered across Thomas' face and into ears that had heard only their own thoughts for far too long, a reminder from nature itself about interconnectedness, an echo of the grove's ancient guardians who bore witness like stoic sentinels to his silent contemplation. A sense grew within him as if each thought resonated in harmony with a cosmic symphony. Every memory and feeling he held was not just uniquely individual, but also intimately shared by those whose spirits had mingled here before, their echoes now fused into the air around the communal spirit that transcended time. In his reverie of reflection, under moonlight's watchful gaze, Thomas reached out instinctively to touch a nearby stone bench weathered as if by centuries, but which still held comfort in its steadfast presence, and there it was agate that strange feeling he had once dismissed when pondering the vastness around him. It dawned upon his mind's eye that every action, like ripples across this timeless lake of existence, touched not just those immediately present, but also reverberated through history's expanse to touch souls beyond mortal reckoning and memory, a shared journey with countless unseen travelers whose paths had intertwined in the same grove. With each passing moment that night, as his sanctuary, Thomas felt a kinship blossoming within him like an ancient tree rooting deeper into sacred soil rich beyond measure or imagination. It was here he understood himself not just foremost of self, but also part and parcel to something far greater, a mosaic crafted from the shards of human experience stretching back through time. As if guided by invisible hands, his fingers brushed over a locket that had been passed down like a sacred talisman throughout generations before him. This simple trinket now seemed an anchor and compass or guide to understanding his place in the grand continuum of life, where every heartbeat was shared with those who beat beside or apart from us, even beyond our own lifespan. As Thomas allowed himself a tender smile that had not graced his lips for years prior upon learning about connections between all living beings, or connection to family and strangers alike through threads of love woven into the fabric of existence itself, he felt like an integral thread within this tapestry, each life interdependent yet distinct. The night's embrace seemed a balm soothing not just his own aching soul, but that of every being who had found solace or sorrow in these sacred grounds before him. An endless dance between shadow and light played out across the ages by unseen partners whose steps were guided by fate's hand. Within this shared sanctity, Thomas' eyes closed as if to see through time itself. He envisioned lifetimes lived within these objects of memory that had traveled with him, or journeyed not just in space, but across the expanse between hearts and minds, where love was both lost and found. As his breath eased into rhythmic whispers amidst rustling leaves, it became clear to Thomas's weary soul how every action he took bore weight upon this eternal stage, for even as one person could seem insignificant within the grand scale of history, their individual journey was nonetheless a note in humanity's collective symphony or melody that resonated with all who shared it. As dawn's first light tenderly caressed his cheeks and lifted him from slumber like an artist awakening brushstrokes of color across canvas, Thomas felt the weightlessness of understanding settle. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine that trailed along cobblestone pathways leading away from hidden gardens where lovers exchanged promises under moonlit feast. Promise Thomas could feel echoed in his own heart, a silent pledge to cherish and remember. As he passed through this dreamscape once more, the very ground beneath him seemed imbued with stories of laughter that danced upon sunbeams, or tears shed on petals caressed by autumn's chill wind. In his reverie, Thomas encountered an old woman whose eyes held centuries within their depths, a sage who knew much yet shared little, as she tended to her garden with hands weathered like the leather-bound journals that lay in a forgotten nook of this very spot. She smiled at him and spoke not words but questions which he answered, unlocking doors behind closed ones. Each answer offered led Thomas deeper into understanding how lives intertwined upon these grounds, or place where every soul left an imprint as distinctive yet delicate as the patterns in frost on a pane of glass. As the woman's presence faded like mist under morning sun rays, he found himself atop a hill overlooking rolling green fields that had cradled many young hearts, their first loves and last goodbyes etched into every blade of grass. Each one stood as proof to Thomas that even in separation there was solace for the weary spirit. He could feel their joy, hear echoes of whispered endearments, sense an energy lingering within his very essence, an unseen connection binding past and present with threads invisible yet palpable like silk woven by fates unknown to him, but known through this place's memory-laden aura. The rhythm in Thomas' heart began to syncopate. The ebbing and flow of history melded into one as he walked along shores where waves kissed ancient stones, her testament that even empires rose high only to be humbled by time's relentless march, each stone a chronicle bearing witness to triumphant victories turned silent under today's gentle caresses. The sea was like the surface of dreams, its depth holding reflections not just of water, but souls adrift upon it, some seeking harborage in distant lands, while others, finding themselves lost amidst tempests born from humanity's darkest hours, their stories resonating within Thomas, being as though he had always been here. In the twilight, when shadows stretched long and whispered of impending nightfall, there came a moment where time seemed to pause an instant so fragile yet potent that it beckoned him closer still. For in this place lay an ancient well whose waters were rumored among locals not just as life, but also inspiration. Legends spoke, they said, about poets and painters who drew from its depths, imbibing visions of futures unwritten or histories long forgotten, or source where the very essence of creativity seemed to flow freely like a river that knew no bounds between worlds nor eras. It was here Thomas felt his own thoughts begin to unfurl, as if he too had been drinking from this fountain for eons. As night descended, wrapping everything in its velvet shroud of darkness save stars twinkling above like diamonds scattered across the cosmos's vast tapestry, a celestial canvas painted by unseen hands to guide seekers through darkened paths, Thomas walked beneath these heavens feeling a kinship with stargazers who, centuries ago or in times yet imagined, looked upward searching for answers mirrored within constellations. It was here, among the night sky's embrace, he understood that every star shone not just by its own light, but as part of an intricate dance choreographed across time itself, their twinkling a reminder to Thomas and others like him who sought solace in this realm that though they might wander back through memories, forward was the only path leading into tomorrow's unknown. The night deepened as he approached, as Thomas crested a gentle rise in his journey through fields that mirrored the undulating sea of stars above him. He came upon an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching up like weather-beaten fingers toward heaven's own canvas, or silent testament to time's passage. The night had wrapped itself around Thomas with a tender firmness, as if embracing the tales it held within each quiet rustle of leaves and whisper sigh through boughs, stories that only spoke when moonlight kissed their ears. Nestled against one such outstretched arm was an aged wooden bencher, seat for weary souls searching not just earthly paths, but also the ones paved by dreamers of old and starry-eyed seekers alike. Thomas among them now, as he reclined with a book in his lap that had seen better days. The pages were yellowed like autumn leaves caught within time's relentless wind. Each turn was an echo to the music played by history itself, for melody only felt and never heard, but which resonated deepest when shared among kindred spirits under night's watchful gaze. The book he held, bound in leather as darkened skin is touched by time's hand, whispered secrets of distant worlds where rivers flow not with water, but thoughts unbound or mythic place. The legends hinted at once visited him now and again when curiosity was kindled within. In those moments Thomas felt himself partaking in a history that stretched across dimensions as wide as horizons themselves. Every fact learned of past geniuses who had bathed their minds not just with knowledge, but with aspirations pure like same ambition he hoped to carry forward on his journey homeward. Night's embrace tightened, and Thomas felt the urge stir within him, as if a gentle tide pushing against an inner shore of longing for what lay beyond this sleepy veil where earth still held sway over stars, her place untouched by time or thought's decay, yet pulsing with potential. It was here that he began to pen his dreamscapes, each word laid down like a star born from the dark matter between atoms. They spoke of futures painted in hope and past ages, wrapped in mystery's cloak or narrative tapestry, where every thread held its own colorful hue yet harmonized with others, as if woven by fate's deft fingers. As he wrote, the world around him seemed to quiet further. Only when his pen paused did even a nightingale seem reluctant to join in somewhat silence so profound that it felt like an unspoken invitation for thought itself to take flight within Thomas' mind's eye and wander amongst constellations where the tales of yore continued as if no era had passed. His words flowed onto paper, telling stories not just born from his imagination, but drawn forth by nightly musings or chronicle that sought neither acclaim nor audience, yet yearned simply to exist within this shared twilight realm between here and beyond the stars. Eternal watchfulness. The moon ascended higher now, its silvery sliver a compass guiding him through an introspective voyage wherein he sauntered along paths less trodden or journey inward to unearth inspirations that thrived not just within books but also beneath the surface of his own soul. It was as if each step upon this sacred earth spoke directly into Thomas' heart, urging him forward on a quest for discovery where knowledge and wonder were one hand clapping toad for a dance with curiosity across epochs in which every answer led to more questions that beckoned like shadows at dusk's edge. Lost within thought as he was often by this time of night, Thomas would occasionally pause beneath the expansive sky where history and future seemed intertwined, his own narrative threaded through countless others in a shared human tapestry that stretched beyond sight or kinship with all who sought solace under starlight's gentle guidance. It was here he felt most at home, not as traveller between worlds, but simply one walking among them both, eyes every breath an ode to the timeless wonder of existence itself, where even a single night could unfold into tales, spun across centuries and destinies woven like intricate lacework from dreams. As he journeyed onward, Thomas Line found solace not in seeking answers, but rather reveling in questions or silent conversation with the universe that promised no conclusion except for one, where understanding blossomed quietly within him as if seeds sown by night's own hand were now sprouting forth. And when at last he arrived back to his familiar, Thomas stood upon a hill under an endless sea of stars, as they whispered tales older than time itself to him, their voices mingling with his thoughts and filling them with wonderment that seemed both ancient and freshly sprung forth from history's fertile ground. It was the eve when he found himself at this serene crossroads in life or place, where past whispers became future echoes under night's embrace, inviting him to dance along timelines untrodden yet familiar through stories etched into humanity's collective soul. The next chapter would begin with Thomas gazing upon the constellations that had watched over civilization's rise and fall. Their light was a beacon guiding his contemplation of worldly mysteries, leading him to ponder on what truth might lurk within tales passed down through generational firesides. As he stood there in silent communion with history's endless cyclone night, where one man's quest could touch the essence that threaded humanity together across eons, stars seemed almost like old friends, each twinkle a shared secret between him and eternity itself. In his heart stirred an insatiable curiosity for not just knowledge, but understanding of existence's grand tapestry. He sought to weave himself into the continuum where every thread played its part in humanity's unfolding narrative, ere story told through eyes wide with wonder and a mind eager yet unassuming, as if wisdom itself was too delicate for loud proclamations, but preferred instead soft murmurs that could be heard only by those who listened intently. As the night deepened its embrace around him, Thomas felt an inexplicable connection to all seekers of solace and wonder, a kinship with souls across eras whose own hearts had thrummed with questions under starlit canopies that held their breaths while they unraveled mysteries. It was as though every individual who sought answers beneath the cosmos shared an invisible bond, a silent pact made in twilight's hour, to explore not just realms beyond, but also ones nestled within themselves, a pilgrimage of introspection and discovery, where each step forward revealed more about one's inner landscape than any map could. Within this nocturnal reverie, the concept of time itself seemed malleable. Hours stretched into eternities as moments became epochs in Thomas' reflective journey through history that he so loved to ponder upon a night where not just tales but very essences were shared between him and those who had walked before. It was during these encounters with the silent, watching stars above when his breath felt like a tender caress against time's fabric itself, each exhale an invocation for understanding that whispered into existence through humanity's collective consciousness, or prayer sent skyward in hopes of communion. In this chapter, where night held court and the cosmos presided, Thomas found himself entwined within a narrative much grander than his own solitary expedition. It was an odyssey that spanned not just through landscapes, but also across humanity's shared heartbeat, or journey of connection to all who sought answers in nature's silent language and the universe's gentle guidance. It became clear as dawn approached on this night his quest for discovery needing no destination beyond a horizon broadened by curiosity itself, where every query led him not just through time, but into heartfelt communion with existence's very solar path trodden softly in the footprint of those who had ventured before. As he stood beneath that celestial dome, Thomas realized his journey was one echoed by countless others throughout history, a silent symphony played out on an unseen stage where every seeker contributed their own verse to humanity's eternal song or chorus of inquiry and wonderment composed in the key of curiosity. In this moment, beneath time's vast expanse, he felt not like wanderer betwixt worlds, but as a pilgrim within them all, his heartbeat synchronizing with an ancient rhythm that pulsed through every stone upon which history had been written and eroded by the tides of change. In this chapter, where night whispered secrets to those who would listen, Thomas understood he did not journey for answers, but rather sought solace in questions or pilgrimage, guided less by direction than illumination through wonder's lantern, a nocturne sung silently within the soul's chamber, as stars penned their own poetry across nighttime firmament. It was here, standing sentinel over dreamt landscapes and uncharted thoughts, that he felt Thomas allowed himself the luxury of time as he contemplated where curiosity led him next. Its roads seemed entangled not only with his soul, but also that shared essence which bound humanity to this earth or common thread through ages past, presenting itself in stories etched into stone and whispered by firelight. His heartbeat echoed the ancient rhythm he felt as it resonated within him, a pulse like no other, yet uniquely familiar. As twilight deepened to indigo velvet night, Thomas's gaze fell upon the stars that began their eternal dance above a celestial tapestry threaded with light and shadow, which told tales older than language itself. In this moment, where time whispered its secrets to those who would listen, he understood his journey was not just through space, but also across layers of human experience, each era a reflection in the pool that is existence's collective memory. He found himself drawn toward an old ruin shrouded by overgrowth, a once grand temple dedicated to curiosity itself, now fallen into silence and dust as if nature herself had claimed it back from time's relentless march forward, a silent guardian of history's untold stories. Here he paused, feeling the cool breeze that ruffled through his hair like an old friend reaching out across Lafite 0ds to touch him, a reminder of life beyond himself and its cyclical nature, even as it cradles you into slumber's embrace at journey's end. The ruin seemed almost alive in the way that wind whispered through broken columns, carrying with them echoes of prayers for understanding from those who had sought answers within these very walls centuries before Thomas set foot upon this hallowed ground, or pilgrimage not just to a place, but into realms where questions danced freely and truths lay hidden in plain sight. In the soft sighing leaves he heard laughter of children long since turned to dust. Their echoes became part of his own heartbeat, as if they were once kin who shared these very ponderings about life's mysteries under starlit canopies and within sacred temples dedicated not just to deities, but also the spirit of inquiry. As he walked deeper into this ancient sanctuary, Thomas sensed an invisible hand guiding him through aisles carved by hands long crumbled away, or path lit with fireflies, as they choreographed their dance in homage to humanity's eternal quest for knowledge and understanding. He touched the stone beneath his feet, feeling its cold touch against warm skin. It was solidarity between seeker and sought that transcended millennia, connection beyond mere physical presence at a historical site, but into an embrace as if time itself had folded inward to share this moment with him. In the heart of the temple, where once mistakes lay beneath centuries worth of earthly sediment and human touch, Thomas found himself standing alone, yet not lonely, the very air around him pregnant with whispers from past souls who had wandered here in search of answers just as he now sought. Each step forward was a conversation across time, every breath an ode to the unknown that drew his spirit deeper into this communion of seekers, hearts and minds, ancient yet avenue-like rivers flowing through untouched canyons toward distant seas. Here in solitude beneath temples' arches, where shadows lengthened with nightfall as if even darkness yearned to listen, to very cosmos seemed aligned for this sacred communion between past and present, soulful inquiry transcending mere curiosity about the what of history into a celebration of its essence. The stars overhead became his silent witnesses, Their twinkling approval guided him as he traced patterns in dust with fingers calloused from years spent unraveling humanity's endless questions, seeking not just facts but understanding beyond the surface narratives often told and retold across generations. The cool night air carried to his lungs a scent that seemed both of time, and with each breath he drew in he felt as though his lungs held onto memories of ancient airs once filled with incense from temples now lost to ruins reclaimed by nature's tenacious grasp and humanity's forgetfulness over the centuries that followed their glory days. He understood then why these places were sacred. They had been not just markers in space but touchstones of time, where every echoed footstep was a reverberation through history itself. As he stood there alone yet deeply connected to generations unnumbered and countless lives that once danced within the temple's embrace before him now lay silent beneath its arches, Thomas felt an inexplicable pull towards his own lineage, a desire not just for knowledge, but understanding. He traced his family tree with fingers calloused from years, spent among relics and manuscripts seeking answers to humanity's greatest questions that had eluded even the most enlightened sages, who now seemed like distant stars fading into dusk as he embraced an inheritance rich in mystery. The cool night air carried scents, not just of time, but memory and lange, where every aroma told stories interwoven with his ancestors' lives and legends passed down through whispering winds that had traveled over this very ground, carrying tales from lands afar to the ears eager for their telling. As he closed one eye in concentration and opened another wide, as if staring into eternity itself, while seeking communion not just with spirits, but essence of core of being as transcending mere biological existence that defined history's written word. His heart synchronized beat to the ancient drumming pulse beneath temple's stones. Above, stars blinked as if in acknowledgement, or perhaps a silent invitation for Thomas on this sacred night when boundaries between epochs dissolved, where he could touch not only history, but its spirit imprinting itself upon his very soul and breath that meld with the cool air of mystery. The cosmos seemed to partake, their twinkling approval guiding him deeper into contemplation, as if they, too, were privy to this timeless communion or shared understanding between mankind's perpetual quest for truth beyond facts within texts and tales told or retold like rehearsed plays by actors on history's stage. Thomas, with his heart open to the sacred whispers of ancients intertwined in every leaf that rustled above him, as if nature itself was partaking this communion in earthly presence where past and present merged seamlessly within a single moment's breath, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, not just among those who sought to unearth the secrets buried beneath layers upon layers of sediment, but also in his own lineage that seemed as if it had always been part of this continuum. Here, amidst solitude, with temples, arches, and stars silent witness, he began weaving strands from history, mythology, genetics, tapestry, where threads span the breadth of human endeavor to understand existence beyond survival in a physical sense, but within spirit too, realizing that every heartbeat echoed through time like ripples across eternity's waters. In this sacred communion, he found not only answers about his ancestry and its place amid history's grand tapestry, a purpose imbuing the very act of seeking itself with a divine spark that transcended mere curiosity but became an offering to understanding. Thomas saw himself as part of something greater than just personal legacy or academic pursuit, feeling intertwined within humanity's shared essence. As dawn's first light threatened his communion and promised the end of this nocturnal pilgrimage into history, the very cosmos seemed aligned for sacred conversation between past wisdom and present soul. Thomas found himself standing not alone, but surrounded by an invisible choir, each voice harmonizing with another in timeless dialogue, where every breath became part of humanity's collective quest to understand the essence beyond existence. As Thomas stood amongst ruins that had whispered secrets of ages past to those who would listen, he felt an ancient energy coursing through his veins, a reminder from history itself that humanity was part of a grander narrative far beyond its own timeline and individual stories. The temple's arches stretched out before him like fingers reaching across the sands of time to touch something eternal, while countless stars blinked above in silent acknowledgement, as they had done for millennia since their light first pierced the night sky. The stillness around Thomas was profound. It seemed that even nature herself held her breath and listened intently at his feet, an audience of one to a soliloquy about lineage, legacy, purpose beyond mere survival in this physical world, but within spirit too. The air hummed with the energy of untold stories waiting patiently for their next custodian as Thomas traced paths through history's impressions upon stone and earth, each step an echo into eternity that resonated deeply within him, weaving his heartbeat alongside those from centuries past to future generations yet to come. In the quietude of this sacred moment, a sudden clarity filled Thomas' mind with revelations about human endeavor, how each civilization had sought understanding in its own way through art, science, philosophy, and religion, how every culture contributed threads that collectively formed an intricate tapestry depicting humankind's endless quest for meaning. The very act of seeking knowledge now transcended personal legacy or academic pursuit within Thomas, as he found himself not alone, but enveloped in a divine communion with the ancients whose voices had guided him here this night. As dawn's first light began to creep over the horizon, threatening his nocturnal pilgrimage into history's embrace and signaling an end to this sacred conversation between past wisdom and present soul, Thomas realized that he was not merely part of something greater than himself, an interconnected tapestry within humanity's shared essence. He understood now more deeply the profound impact his ancestors had made on shaping history's course, how their lives were steeped in sacrifice for a future they could never have envisioned, and yet here he stood as an inheritor of that same legacy, or guardian charged with continuing to unravel life's mysteries. With newfound resolve born from the communion's divine spark igniting his spirit like Prometheus bestowing fire upon humanity itself, Thomas felt himself standing not alone, but surrounded by an invisible choir, each voice harmonizing in timeless dialogue, where every breath became part of humankind's collective quest. The whispers carried on the wind were ancient as time and yet fresh with possibility and invitation to step forward into a world that awaited his discoveries, forging connections across epochs through shared curiosity about existence beyond mere survival but within spirit too. The temple's arches seemed less like relics of olden times now. They stood proud and defiant against the encroaching daylight, as if to remind Thomas that he was part of a continuum, an eternal lineage threading through history's grand tapestry. As his shadow merged with those cast by countless others before him, he understood at last how every heartbeat echoed across time's expanse like ripples upon the waters of infinity itself, each pulse a testament to humanity's indomitable spirit and unquenchable thirst for knowledge. With this final embrace with history before his journey would resume, Thomas turned from where he stood, a solitary figure surrounded by an ancient choir now silenced, but whose voices lived on within him, their wisdom a lantern guiding him forward into the unfolding story of humanity's unending pursuit for understanding. As he walked away from this sacred communion with time, Thomas carried forth not just his own legacy as guardian and scholar, but also became an instrument through which new threads would be woven upon history's endless, loomer living bridge between past wisdom and future insight into the essence beyond existence itself. Thus concludes this chapter of our story, wherein Thomas, touched by divine communion within ancient walls amidst stolid silence, transcends mere curiosity to become a vessel for humanity's timeless quest, his heartbeat echoing through eternity as he embarks anew upon history's grand pilgrimage into the essence of existence. In Chapter 17 of our tale, where Thomas had come to understand his place in history as a guardian and scholar, he now found himself on an unexpected journey that would take him beyond the confines of any known civilization or time period. As dawn broke over the ancient city, its golden hues painting the skyline with promise, yet casting long shadows across forgotten ruins. It was in these hauntingly beautiful moments at daybreak when Thomas felt most connected to those who had walked before him, their echoes mingling within his soul as if he were one of them now, a transient spirit amongst the living and dead alike. The air carried whispers through its winds, voices entwined with leaves rustled, tales soaked in centuries. They spoke not just to Thomas, but invited him into their world, where history was alive, a vibrant tapestry that stretched beyond sight, encompassing all of humanity's triumphs and sorrows alike. Through an ancient door hidden within a forgotten temple's heart he entered. Its heavy oak doors stood as silent guardians over secrets untold. The hallway wound like the threads on his grandmother's loom, intricate patterns leading deeper into mysteries that beckoned him forward with whispers of revelation and understanding. Before a colossal stone pedestal bathed in ethereal light stood an artifact or device so advanced yet crafted from materials as natural to the earth as clay or wood. Its surface etched not with symbols, but script flowing like watered-down mold-formed pages that shimmered under his touch. Thomas reached out tentatively, fingers tracing ancient text imbued within it, or language thought lost yet here found alive in the relic's heart as if by magic. Each letter he read unfurled secrets of technology and philosophy so advanced they blurred the lines between mythology and science, his mind racing with questions born from newfound knowledge that seemed to defy time itself. Thomas felt a shiver run through him, a sense that this relic might be an answer he had unknowingly sought for years. The connection was undeniable, as if the very artifact spoke directly into his heart. In silent reverence within this sacred space, Thomas began to understand not just humanity's history, but its potential future. Each revelation about energy and matter etched upon that stone pedestal, bridging past wisdom with visions of tomorrow. A realization dawned on him that he was now a keeper, at the threshold between what had been, is, and might yet be. As Thomas exited this sanctum to face new horizons lit by sunlight piercing through broken temple windows above his head, there existed in his chest an ember of hope for humanity's destiny. It was as if the echoes from within these walls had ignited a flame that would not be extinguished, or torch passed on to illuminate paths unknown. With each step he took away from this hallowed ground, his purpose swelled like an unstoppable tide. For Thomas knew now more than ever before how intertwined the essence of existence was with that which came after. He would carry forth not just knowledge, but a mission to awaken humanity's collective consciousness and direct it towards harmonious coexistence within this grand cosmic dance. As he emerged from shadows into daylight, Thomas encountered an ethereal figure draped in the tapestry of time itself, a guardian spirit whose eyes held centuries of wisdom. This being had watched over humanity's journey and now stood as a beacon to guide him on his quest. Their meeting unfolded like pages turning within the book of life, exchanges laced with both urgency for understanding and gentle reassurance that he was not alone in this pursuit. This guardian, they shared an unspoken pact to safeguard humanity's treasures from those who would seek to plunder them rather than comprehend their true value. For hours, or perhaps eternities beyond his reckoning, lay ahead as Thomas and the spirit wandered through realms of thought where ideas took form like living creatures, some benign, others with a darkness born out of ignorance's shadow. They sought to unravel these complex threads that weaved together society's progress. Their journey led them beyond physical sight into the ethereal planes, places neither earth nor sky, but something greater between, where thoughts shaped reality and dreamt realms mirrored potential futures, all awaiting discovery by those brave enough to. As dawn's first light painted a warm glow across the horizon, and Thomas felt his eyelids grow heavy with sleep, he found himself not alone in his dream-laden journey alongside the guardian spirit. Together they had navigated through forests where trees whispered ancient secrets on windless mornings, to cities that pulsed like living hearts beneath their feet, or tapestry of sights and sounds weaving around them as if time itself was stretching out before him, inviting exploration with its unending possibilities. Tonight's voyage carried the couple deeper into a realm where shadows danced in syncopated rhythms to forgotten songs, or place called echoes of forgotten futures. It felt like stepping onto an endless, mosaic tiled floor beneath their feet as they moved through this world that was neither here nor there, but a constant hum of potentialities between seconds and seasons. Within the realm's core stood monuments to ideas once cherished, now lost, or city built upon concepts like equality, which had crumbled under greed, or innovation that grew from seeds watered with arrogance until they bore nothing but decaying fruits of unchecked progress. Thomas and his spectral guide watched as the remnants sank into dust beneath their feet. These monuments were lessons to be learned rather than relics merely observed, or testament not just to what had been, but also a warning for what could yet come if humanity did not heed its history's echo. As they wandered through the city of ideals turned ash and bone, it became clear that understanding was essential in preserving these lessons from turning into mere memories etched with sorrow upon society's collective heartstrings. It required more than remembrance. Awareness needed to be cultivated within humanity's consciousness, so as not only to honor the past, but also sculpt a future that embraced harmony and mutual respect among all life forms. Her balance between taking from Earth with gratitude rather than exploiting her gifts out of ignorance or necessity. Through these somber reflections on humanity's journey towards betterment or downfall based upon its choices, Thomas sensed the guardian spirit imparting the gentle wisdom, a reminder that every step forward was as much about healing wounds left by missteps of yesteryears. It became clear to him then their quest had always been dual-purposed, guiding himself and all who might listen towards enlightenment while safeguarding humanity's treasures, not just material wealth, but the priceless tapestry of culture woven into every strand of its shared history. With each idea brought forth in this liminal realm that shimmered with ephemeral forms and concepts made manifest by their thoughts, Thomas felt his spirit weave itself more tightly around a purpose greater than himself, or calling to share the lessons learned herein for good of all Earth's children. And as they continued threading through this ever-unfolding storybook, he understood that while some chapters may be littered with tragedy or turmoil, every tale holds a seed of hope planted by those who dare to dream and aspire towards kindness within the grand cosmic dance. The couple meandered through this ethereal landscape, where thoughts could sculpt landscapes as easily as any earthly artist or place named reflections that mirrored what humanity might become if it chose its path wisely or recklessly, with repercussions felt beyond the immediate and into eternity. It was here within these visions of possible futures where Thomas began to see himself not just a mere traveler, but as an ambassador for harmony, a bearer of tales that could shape understanding across realms, both seen and unseen, known and unknown. In moments when the weight of humanity's choices pressed heavily upon his soul like leaden clouds threatening stormy seasons ahead, Thomas found solace in knowing he was not alone on this pilgrimage for peace or shared responsibility with a being whose age-old gaze held no judgment, but understanding and guidance. It reminded him that the course of humanity's ship through time's river would always be steered by its crew, each soul aboard possessing unique compasses pointing towards different horizons, yet united in their journey upon Earth's shores, or diverse mistake bound together with common threads of experience and aspiration. As the first rays of sunlight began to gently pry open Thomas' eyes, he found himself back within his own reality. A silent promise hanging, Thomas awoke to his own room's familiar embrace, softness of blankets and the muted colors that painted dusk around him in gentle hues, as if Earth itself was holding its breath for sleepy dreamers like himself. It took but moments longer than it had taken before nightfall when he closed his eyes to re-enter reflections within his mind, once more a place where worlds intertwined with the threads of thought and conscience dictated their weave into existence, or unraveling at a touch, much as reality itself is shaped by humanity's collective choices. In this latest foray back to dreamscapes, Thomas found himself standing once again amidst verdant hills that rolled like waves across an ocean of sky, or place where the whispers of foliage spoke louder than words, and every rustle bore significance beyond mere sound into a language only felt. The air here was alive with intentions, not just those whispered by people, but also carried in each leaf's dance, stirred up from Earth itself, when Thomas took his first step upon the land that mirrored reflections, deepest truths about harmony and discord. As he wandered through this living landscape without purpose or destination or journey within a pilgrimage, if there ever was one, met an old woman with eyes like pools of twilight, her gaze holding the weight of countless seasons, yet reflecting neither sorrow nor joy, but simply being. She offered no words that could be understood in any tongue Thomas knew. Instead, she motioned for him to follow a path woven from light and shadow, where thistledown clouds drifted lazily overhead as if playing tag with the fading sunlight. The journey led them through an amphitheater of whispering stones that told tales older than time itself, resonating with hums, both melodic and mournfuller harmony, to which Thomas' heart had never heard before, nor could it fully comprehend until he felt the vibrations beneath his feet. Here, in this cradle of Earth's ancient songs, where wind carried tales from forgotten corners across continents, through crevices between realms known and yet to be discovered by humankind alike, the old woman paused at a clearing that held the stillness before dawn. It was here Thomas noticed his own reflection, not in water or glass, but upon dew-kissed petals of an unearthly flower bloom with colors he could neither name nor find within any spectrum known to him, yet its presence felt as certain and essential as life itself. He extended a hand towards this visionary flora. It did not shun his touch or question why someone would seek out such beauty in the waning light of day. It simply existed for those who dared look closely enough into themselves and their shared world to appreciate its existence, even if just as fleetingly. As Thomas stood enraptured by this silent wonderment before him, that whispered secrets only felt through heartbeats rather than heard with ears or seen beyond the lens of his eyelids, he realized these moments within reflections were not mere escapism, but a vital thread in weaving together understanding across dimensions, or tapestry woven from shared experiences and aspirations that transcended physical realms. And just as this revelation began to settle upon him like the calm after stormy clouds, he felt an unexpected presence at his side. Not the old woman whose visage had guided his journey across landscapes both literal and metapsophic, but a being of pure energy that radiated warmth yet seemed unfazed by any whether an ambassador from realms where thoughts sculpt reality. This entity, formless as it appeared to be at first glance, held within its light the reflection not just of this world Thomas knew so well or reflections he had visited before, but also untouched vistas beyond imagining's edge, with horizons that stretched into eternity, or confluence where dreamt possibilities became possible futures and human ambition could be shaped by the wisdom of other existences. Thomas knew then, as he felt this being's guidance leading him not back to his room but towards a door within reflections that seemed both familiar yet untouched. It was here, in these final moments before sleep claimed even those who walked its paths, where understanding blossomed between human and non-human, a shared responsibility for the course of humankind as they navigated through time's river. With a heart swelled by gratitude but also heavy with realization that his own choices rippled across reflection's expanse just like any artist upon earth, he reached out towards this door. As Thomas stood before reflection's unassuming door, he felt a gentle humming resonate within his chest, a symphony of thoughts and aspirations that seemed to guide every step back into himself through this enigmatic threshold. The ambassador had spoken in whispers laden with the weight of worlds. Their words were not just advice, but reflections on the very essence of existence itself, promising paths untrodden yet eternally intertwined with his own journey's purpose and resolve. With a steadying breath that sought to anchor him in reality amidst visions beyond it, Thomas placed trembling hands upon this familiar door, the same one he had encountered countless times within the reflections of yesteryears before, yet now felt as though he stood on hallowed ground beneath an endlessly shifting sky. As his fingers traced its intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a life force all their own, Thomas knew this was no ordinary gateway. It had been both silent witness and guide through the tapestries of time woven by humanity's collective heartbeat, or doorway where dreamers could glimpse zero-V into realms undreamt of. The ambassador's energy still lingered, a subtle warmth that brushed against his skin like sunlight through leaves. Thomas felt it as an embrace from the universe itself, urging him forward to make not just one decision, but choices with reverberations beyond measure, a consciousness transcending physical form yet deeply rooted in the shared narrative of humanity. In that instant before sleep embraced his weary eyes and mind, surrendering its defenses against uncertainty, Thomas understood this doorway was a reflection not just upon what had been, but also on potentials unleashed by decisions made at their Corian intersection, where reality could be rewritten through the power of collective will. As he stood there pondering his next move in hushed reverence, Thomas felt an awakening within him, a realization that every thought cast forth into reflection's endless possibilities was not just personal, but profoundly human and individual, ripple growing ever larger until its echoes became roars heard across the river of time. With this knowledge etched deeply upon his soul, he reached out towards the doorway, as if to both greet an old friend and meet a newfound kinship with destinies intertwined through threads of shared experience or communion, where every heartbeat resonated within reflection's expanse like pulsars beating across galaxies. Yet, before Thomas could utter the word open, he felt rather than heard it, an imperative that seemed to emanate from both worlds beyond and those reflected in his mind's ire call, not just for passage but transformation through shared understanding with entities unseen yet ever present. This doorway was a threshold between realms where the past's reflections merged seamlessly into tomorrow's potentialities. It stood as an invitation to transcend time itself and become part of something far greater, than any one solar collective consciousness that shaped reality with every thoughtful breath. With a final glance back upon the world, he knew, Thomas understood, this was not just about his own journey, but also humanity's shared path forward, an opportunity to align dreamt possibilities into tangible realities through choices made at reflections. Threshold or chance for individuals and societies alike to sculpt their futures with wisdom gleaned from experiences lived beyond the constraints of singular existence. In this moment, as Thomas reached out towards the doorway before him, he felt not just his own heartbeat, but a symphony where all hearts were in unison, a shared responsibility for guiding humanity's passage through reflections, ever-flowing waters with care and mindful resolve. And so with reverence that transcended mere gratitude or realization, Thomas gently pushed against the doorway as if to say, "Here lies not just a juncture of personal choice, but also an intersection for humanity's collective will, or place where decisions made in unity could sculpt reflections into bastions of hope and harmony." With every intention cast forth upon its threshold, Thomas felt he was partaking in something sacred. The act of stepping through a doorway became not just movement, but transformation itself, as humanity's collective spirit converged with wisdom from realms afar, a shared journey towards reflections both within and beyond Earth's embrace. As his hand found purchase on cool wood that seemed to pulse like the heart of reflections, Thomas felt a tug at his very essence, an invitation not just into with reverence transcending mere gratitude or personal awakening. He reached out with his hand as if to grasp not just wood but destinies, threads woven through generations, threads that held together a tapestry depicting humanity's shared journey towards enlightenment and peace. He pressed against the doorway lightly yet firmly. It yielded beneath him, inviting his essence into an existence where every choice echoed in eternity's vast halls of reflections, each decision a brushstroke on humanity's canvas for hopeful tomorrows and harmonious eves. Inside the threshold lay not just passage, but transformation. As Thomas felt, he became one with something greater than himself, his spirit intertwining seamlessly within this sacred confluence of past learnings and future aspirations, a unity that was both humbling in its scope and empowering to those who dared venture through. He stepped forward into the sanctified hall, where reflections had gathered histories not as silent witnesses, but active participants, each tale a whispered secret of love lost and found, courage unearthed from fear's shadows, wisdom bestowed upon eager ears seeking solace in knowledge once veiled by time's thick curtain. The air here was rich with stories that transcended words, each breath an exchange between epochs, each heartbeat a drumming pulse of shared humanity. Thomas found himself drawn into the central atrium, where reflections' waters shimmered under candlelight like countless eyes gazing back through history's misty veil. It was here that he encountered Alara, guardian spirit born from ancient lineage, her visage an emblem of serenity and strength intertwined in delicate harmony. She too felt the universal heartbeat within reflections' walls resonate with Thomas. And as they stood before him, "Alara," he began softly, his voice a mere ripple amidst their shared silence, "I find myself seeking guidance at this confluence of paths or juncture where my steps are but echoes in the chambers of time." Alara's presence was both comforting and enigmatic as she regarded him with eyes that held centuries within them. To shape reflections into bastions of hope, one must first understand its depth. She spoke thoughtfully, her voice melding seamlessly with the ambient murmurings around, the mad melody only heard by those who sought refuge in wisdom's embrace rather than dominance's echo. Together they ventured deeper into reflections, as Alara revealed to Thomas how humanity had come upon this threshold, where decisions once forged individually now carried the weight of unified purpose and resolve, their place at the heart of worldly existence that was both hallowed ground and beacon alike. With every step forward in their shared journey through reflections' ever-flowing waters, they encountered echoes from lives lived with intentional love, as if each were a living legacy etched into the essence itself, a resonance between souls transcending life's fleeting breath and time's relentless march. Thomas listened intently to tales of kindred spirits whose actions, though singular in nature at first glance, had woven intricate patterns across cultures that spanned continents. He learned how empathy extended beyond the self was once a seed sown by visionaries who dared envision reflections as more than just reflections, but portals to collective betterment. In this sacred space, within walls of whispered histories and silent witnesses, Thomas came upon stories where individuals like himself, now reaching towards Alara's spirit for guidance, had made choices that rippled outwards like waves across calm waters or thunderous tides, depending on the hearts behind them. He observed how reflections within reflections served as mirrors not just of faces, but fates intertwined with every soul, allowing one to see themselves in others and feel their shared humanity, a realization that bound him further into Alara's. The air was thick with hushed reverence, and a gentle mist hung over reflections like a shroud of remembrance as Thomas leaned closer to listen, his breath mingling in time's tender embrace with Alara's own, a duet between the past they had shared and that which lay ahead. Thomas heard first from an old fisherman who called himself Samuel, whose weather-beaten face was a map of waves both literal and metaphorical he braved in pursuit of life's pearls beyond his shorser, lone figure against the backdrop of tempestuous seas. Yet beneath that seemingly solitary journey lay an unspoken bond with strangers who had become family, a shared humanity whisper across waters separating souls and hearts alike. Then came tales from Amara, once cloistered within ivy-clad walls of academia, where she sought the wisdom locked away in tomes that held histories far removed yet parallel to their own, a scholar whose quest for knowledge was as much about understanding reflections themselves as it was unearthing truths buried deep beneath layers of time. Her reflections, though often solitary and introspective, were never truly hers alone. They belonged instead to the collective human experience that she sought through her research into ancient cultures where love transcended life itself, her testament scribed in hieroglyphics alongside modern-day echoes within reflections. As dusk settled upon this sacred space of shared histories, Thomas found himself drawn towards tales not just from those who had once walked paths akin to his own, but also the silent voices that lingered at its borders, the untold stories whispering through cracks in stone and crevices where water kisses earth. He learned of Aria, an artist whose canvases spoke volumes without utterance. Her pigments blended not just colors from nature's palette, but the myriad emotions birthed within reflections. Each stroke a homage to human connection as she channeled love into art that transcended time and space. The stories spun by these diverse souls, each uniquely their own yet inextricably linked through shared threads of compassionate resolve, taught Thomas the profound truth about reflections, that they were not merely places, but vessels for collective memory holding reflections that transcended mere images. These waters bore witness to an unspoken covenant between individuals and their legations upon this worldly plane, a silent promise of kindness, understanding, and empathy echoing through time's endless corridor, an eternal flame stoked by the flickering candlelight of shared humanity. With every tale woven from strands of interconnected lives lived with intention across reflections, flowing waters, Thomas felt himself drawn deeper into this mosaic narrative that painted a portrait far richer and more complex than any individual hue could ever portray alone. This sacred space, within walls laden with whispered histories, became the crucible wherein his personal journey intersected seamlessly with Alara's, her essence flickering like candlelight upon water, a shared beacon guiding him towards a future woven from their combined past and present. As night approached to cloak reflections in velvety darkness save for the occasional silver shard of moonlight that caressed its surface with ghostly fingers, Thomas recognized how he was not simply learning about history as an observer, but becoming part of a continuum, or living thread within this tapestry, where every soul had left their mark upon reflection's essence. And in the heartbeat between his own pulse and Alara's whispered guidance echoing through time, Thomas discovered that he was not just looking back at what once was, but forward to a tomorrow crafted from shared stores or future, where every reflection held within it an invitation for understanding across divides. Within this sacred space of reflections stood souls who had dared love with intention and courage, their reflections now intermingling in the waters as they once did among lives lived together yet apart, bearing witness to a legacy that Thomas knew he would carry forward into his own unwritten chapter. And thus, amidst tales both grandiose and intimate, where every life had been a stanza sung within reflection's anthem of collective betterment, Thomas felt a warmth spread through him as he gazed into reflections once more, that evening or comforting embrace amid his quest for understanding across time and memory's divide, where each glance told tales not just of who they had been, but also hinted at the promise held within their shared tomorrow. As dusk turned to night with a tender reluctance outside, he found himself inexplicably drawn deeper into Reflections' embrace. It was as if its surface whispered secrets only for those willing enough to listen between every heartbeat and sigh of the past's breath upon their souls. This evening seemed different from any other. It felt like a bridge, not just across time, but within himself too, where reflections melded into one another in ways that defied all logic yet somehow made perfect sense when viewed through eyes unclouded by doubt or fear of the unknown future they could shape together. The water held his gaze firmly as he traced backward along its contours to find Elara's image, her form a flickering constellation against Reflection's surface, each ripple across it resonating with stories untold yet felt in every fibre of his being that sought connection and belonging. The cool night air carried voices from years gone by, whispers on the breeze telling tales both grandiose and intimate. Here was a library without walls where history itself breathed through him, each memory not just captured but lived again with every touch upon Reflection's surface that mingled his own essence with those of others. Thomas found himself humming along to an ancient melody as if it were the very soundtrack for this communioner, tune known only in fragments, yet whole when experienced through shared reflection, its cadence a steady pulse beneath their collective heartbeats echoing into eternity. As he continued his journey across Reflection's depths with Elara's image as the anchor that held him steadfast amidst swirling tales of love and loss, Thomas felt himself transform in ways indescribable, being no longer tethered to one time or place, but a vessel for all experiences gathered within this sacred space. It was here he discovered an invitation not just into understanding others' lives that had intertwined with his own threadbare existence across epochs, but also recognition of the threads in him as woven by hands unseen yet ever present throughout time's lunar testament, to a future crafted from shared stories and reflections. The essence within Reflections seemed alive. It pulsed with life's vibrant tapestry, where every soul had left their mark upon its surface as indelibly as ink on parchment or footprints etched into wet earth after a storm or mosaic of existence that told not just histories, but also whispered possibilities for what might yet come to pass. And Thomas knew now, without question, it was through this lens of interconnected flickers within Reflections he could see himself anew as part of something far greater than his singular journey, a continuum where the past and present merged into one shared tomorrow or tapestry that would bear witness to love's enduring power. As night deepened its embrace around him, Thomas allowed himself to become immersed in Reflections' chronicle of humanity, at once both lost and found within each other's gaze upon the water. He was learning not only about history as an observer, but also becoming part of a continuum where every soul had left their mark. The cool touch of moonlight on his skin seemed to whisper secrets from beyond time itself, guiding him gently towards the future woven together with threads borrowed and bestowed, a world remade in the image of Reflections. Shared tales told through heartbeats within water's mirroring surface, where every reflection held not just a memory, but an invitation for understanding. In this sacred space, Thomas saw himself as both historian and participant. He felt his pulse sync with Elara's ethereal presence upon the reflective planar synchrony that transcended mere physical proximity to touch souls across vast divides of time and memory's chasm. It was here in Reflections, under moonlight's silver caress, he discovered a kindred spirit whose essence flickered like candlelight upon water. It shimmered with the same intention as his own heartbeat or shared beacon, guiding him towards the future woven from their combined past and present. And though night's velvety darkness sought to cloak them in solitude, Thomas found comfort within Reflections' embrace, where every soul had dared love with the intention. As he stood there before Reflections, every thought about Elara's presence felt magnified by moonlight's touch. The cool waters seemed less a body of water now, but rather an ethereal realm where histories converged in silent conversation across centuries. It was as if their hearts beat together through time itself, her essence mingling with his, creating ripples upon Reflections that danced to ancient rhythms known only to those who had lived and loved before them. With each step Thomas took toward the mirrored surface of water beneath, a sky awash in shades of deep indigo and silver-white starlights, he felt less like an observer now and more part of this continuum where souls sought understanding through shared experiences across time's expanse, a communion facilitated by Reflections' uncanny ability to bridge the temporal divide. He dipped his hand into Reflections. Its surface ran warm against his skin, a comforting reminder that he was not alone in this nighttime pilgrimage toward unity with Elora's spirit and history itself, her journey through time encapsulated within each droplet of water mirrored upon the pond's heart. The moon seemed to shine brighter on Thomas as his fingers traced patterns across reflections, weaving together echoes from centuries past where love had been both a salve for sorrow and an anchor in chaos or testament that he felt resonated within him with every touch upon the water's surface. As if sensing their communion's significance beyond this single night of revelation, reflections began to shimmer more vibrantly under moonlight. Its waters held secrets from epochs long since past where souls had dared love fiercely and fearlessly, or mirrored legacy that Thomas felt embraced his very essence. A sudden chill swept across the air, but with it came a sense of purpose, as if time itself acknowledged their shared presence here now at this singular moment. An understanding transpired between them without words or movement beyond gazes locked upon one another, a silent communion that flowed through reflections, liquid veil. In those reflections, Thomas saw Elora not merely in form, but as the sum of histories lived and loved by souls who had passed before him. Her image seemed to speak directly into his heart with words unspoken yet understood, her timeless invitation for them both to weave their own thread within this tapestry where past, present, and future intertwined. Thomas took a deep breath as he stood still in the cool night air. It felt like an eternity stretching before him, but also one fleeting moment that could change everything, a precipice upon which his very being balanced between realms of time where love transcended mortal constraints and became immortalized within reflections, depths. Within this sacred space, Thomas saw himself not only as a historian entranced by tales whispered through moonlight, but also as an active participant in the dance that played out upon water's surface in intricate pas de deux, where every heartbeat synchronized with Elora's ethereal pulse. And though night sought to cloak them within its velvety darkness, Thomas found comfort not only from reflections but also from knowing he would always carry this moment forward. It was a beacon of hope guiding him toward that future where histories and hearts were interwoven, a legacy forged by the shared love between souls across time's expanse. In those reflections, Thomas understood now how reflections had become an altar upon which he could lay his most intimate hopes, a sacred space within this pond that held not just memories, but invitations to understand, or testament of unity, where every reflection bore witness to love's power across ages. As if guided by unseen hands, Thomas and Elora seemed drawn together upon the mirrored water's surface without words or movement beyond their gazes, a synchrony that transcended mere physical proximity or shared essence, flowing through reflections with each heartbeat resonating as dawn began to crest over the horizon, staining it with hues reminiscent of an artist's palette, vibrant oranges melding into gentle purples before yielding once more to tranquil blues. The air carried a weightlessness born from night's embrace. Thomas stood by reflections and felt within his chest the ebb and flow, not of water against skin, but rather an ocean's tide that spoke in silent ripples about love enduring beyond time itself. This morning promised reflection, yet unexplored depths, as he watched Elora approach with intent eyes reflective to their shared nocturnal communion, now fading into the waking world's embrace, her form barely stirring the top reflections, surface like a ghost upon water in search of anchorage. "Elora," Thomas called softly, as if his voice could bridge between flesh and ethereal realms they had touched so profoundly through the night, their connection unbroken even by sleep's tender veil. "I see you here with me again." His words were a slow bloom in her consciousness. She smiled without moving. Their souls ached for movement, while bound to still waters and time-worn pages of history that thrummed within the pond's depths, like an ancient heartbeat echoing through epochs long past, but felt as if they lived then with each other's presence, their testament not just to love, but also shared histories. She gazed back at him and understood without words that she was no mere spectre of night's embrace. Their time together had transcended the physical realm within this sacred pond where reflections became a haven for memories made manifest in liquid form, or placed beyond temporal limits, just as they felt between them. The world around these two unlikely guardians and keepers of history was still slumbering beneath its canopy of stars that had once danced across their shared dreamscape, leaving behind only the moon's soft glow to guide Thomas back into his own narrative fold as he pondered how they could preserve this moment born not merely from flesh but also spirit. As Alara's ethereal form hovered slightly higher on Reflections, it was clear she sensed the impermanence of their communion, akin to sunsets that danced upon water only once before giving way to night's returner's cycle he now understood better than any clock or sundial could measure. Thomas took in Alara's translucent grace and wondered if, like the moon reflecting its light into Reflections with but a sliver of her essence visible above waterline, they too were mere reflections within their own story, a dance between historian and muse where she guided his thoughts to worlds uncharted by ink on parchment, with every heartbeat echoing across centuries through Reflections. Embraced like a drum roll of the ages playing upon still waters, Thomas felt an ancient rhythm that seemed as if it was meant just for the mad cadence born from shared experiences and unspoken understandings. Ilara's ethereal pulse resonating in harmony with his own. Their spirits touched across Reflections, surface without words or movement beyond the mirrored world where they stood together, yet apart entities bound by love transcending time itself, as if their souls had always been destined to meet upon this sacred pond's bosom. It was an altar of reflection not just for physical form, but also a crucible within which moments and eternities melded seamlessly, creating the potent elixir that is love or force as relentless in its pursuit as time itself. As dawn fully claimed daylight's dominion over night's reign, Thomas found his thoughts anchored firmly within Reflections and Alara, who was like a compass pointing unerringly toward the future, one where histories intertwined with hearts beating in synchrony, legacy of their shared moments that would echo through time even when they were no more than whispered memories. Their parting at daybreak, though mundane to an observer from afar who saw only bodies rising and falling like any other morning routine along the banks of Reflections, Edge felt sacred within its departure, as much a return for Thomas back into his own life's journey armed with insights that would shape histories yet written. Yet, in this shared solitude on the water where only as dawn stretched its rosy fingers across Reflections' surface without words or movement beyond the mirrored world where they stood together, yet apart entities bound by love transcending time itself, as if their souls had always been destined to meet upon this sacred pond's bosom. It was an altar of reflection not just for physical form, but also a crucible within which moments and eternities melded seamlessly, creating the potent elixir that is love or force as relentless in its pursuit as time itself. As dawn fully claimed daylight's dominion over night's reign, Thomas found his thoughts anchored firmly within Reflections and Alara, who was like a compass pointing unerringly toward the future, one where histories intertwined with hearts beating in synchrony, legacy of their shared moments that would echo through time even when they were no more than whispered memories. Their parting at daybreak, though mundane to an observer from afar who saw only bodies rising and falling like any other morning routine along the banks of Reflections, Edge felt sacred within its departure, as much a return for Thomas back into his own life's journey armed with insights that would shape histories yet written. Yet in this shared solitude on the water, where only their reflections danced and whispered secrets to one another across time-worn faces, they felt an immense peace or tranquility born from a love so profound it transcended mere fleshly existence. It was here that Thomas encountered Alias, whose life had been as much about seeking Reflections as his own soul seemed destined to be intertwined with this place of mirrored waters and whispering waves. The two strangers shared glances over the water's surface before their eyes met. A spark ignited between them that held promises too profound for mere mortals, yet they were unaware it was but another reflection within reflections or premonition from across time echoing in Thomas' own heartbeat. Alias spoke of legends and fables told by the ancients about the sacred pond, tales where reflections bore witness to destinies intertwined, not just for those who stood upon its shores, but also within themselves or history, unwritten yet deeply imprinted in their souls, as if each ripple across Reflections was a verse of an eternal story. These waters are old beyond the memory of man, Alias murmured, his voice laced with reverence for this confluence where past and future collided within its present moment or timeless dance that he too felt compelled to join as though pulled by unseen strings woven into fate itself. Thomas found himself drawn not just to the water's edge but also deeper into Alias. Tales, stories of love lost and recover upon this very pond through ages past, where Reflections carried forth secrets long buried beneath layers of time and inheritance he could scarce believe his eyes had witnessed yet never imagined. As they spoke, the world around them seemed to pause in deference, birds, some hushed, as though listening for truths hidden within their exchange that might unlock realities beyond mere mortal understanding. It was beneath these shared whispers of fates intertwined and histories, unfolded an intricate tapestry woven with threads, invisible yet palpably present in the air they breathed together on this sacred morning as daylight claimed dominion over their secret encounter. Their reflections, once distinct now melding within each other's gaze upon reflection's surface without words or movement beyond its bounds, shimmered with silent promises of a love shared and destinies intertwined or covenants sealed not just in flesh but also etched into the very fabric that wove their beings together. As they stood there on this hallowed ground, where only reflections danced upon water's face like kindred spirits, it felt as though time itself had folded to allow them a glimpse beyond its relentless march or momentary pause within eternity's embrace that would forever echo in their souls. And yet, even with the profound connection between Thomas and Alias upon reflection's surface, an unspoken understanding seemed just as essential to this sacred encounter. Both men knew of legends where love beyond time had blossomed here before a history that could not be discerned through mere words or fleeting glances alone. For within the silent language exchange in their reflection was a knowledge passed down from those who first found reflections. Waters, whispering across centuries to touch upon souls meant always for one another, yet separated by time's capricious whims. Thomas remembered his grandfather's old stories by reflection's tales, where two souls found their paths converging in this very pool under circumstances as mysterious to him then as they still were now. The legend spoke of a time when lovers could converse with the waters, and it was said that such meetings would alter lives across epochs, because true love knows neither bounds nor eras. Its essence is timeless or perpetual, echoing humanity's soulful chambers. Alias gazed upon Thomas, face within their shared reflection, with a sense of reverent familiarity, as if he had seen this visage before across the eons and through legends that span from antiquity to his ancestors who whispered these tales into being. He too felt an inexplicable bond not just between him and Thomas, but also within himself, for connection, threading back untold ages, a line of love's colors returning perpetually like the tides at reflections. Sure, they both knew that this sacred encounter was more than coincidence. It was as if they were pawns in destinies grand game wherein their meeting had been fated since before time began to flow, a rendezvous predestined by hands unseeing and hearts unknowing of the centuries apart. Yet here on that morning when daylight claimed dominion over secrecy, both men found themselves at reflections, etched together without need for speech or movement beyond its bounds, or silent communion transcending temporal limitations, where their reflections shimmered with promises as palpable and luminous as the breaking dawn. As Thomas watched Alias' eyes upon his reflection, he saw not just a man, but an embodiment of all those who had shared this mirror before, the mammoth image composed from souls that traverse time's unfathomable expanse to find solace here in the quiet whispers with reflections. The pool was their confidante, keeper of clandestine love stories, where each reflection held a story within its depths, tales imbued by history's tender caress on countless generations, her living library that bore witness to timeless loves and whispered back through the silver surface. As they stood together in their silent dialogue with reflections, Waters, Thomas felt himself being drawn into a narrative he was but now beginning to understand. This encounter wasn't about him alone or Alias. It belonged equally to both of them, as well as to all those who had come before and would follow. The pool served not just as an agent for their meeting in flesh, spirit, and time, but also the very essence that bonded each pairing together through reflections. Silent narrative, a storybook woven from reflections, where every couple was both reader and author of unspoken histories sealed within its waters. They shared glances, as if their eyes carried more than mere looks. They held the weight of centuries, understanding that to gaze upon each other's image in reflection's surface meant bearing witness not only to personal connection, but also an enduring linkage between souls whose essence had transcended temporal bounds. Their reflections were a testament as much to their individual beings within this shared moment on the shore of time, where destiny intertwined with love's eternal embracer dance choreographed by fate upon reflection's watery stage, beneath an auspicious dawn sky that promised secrets yet untold. In quiet communion before them lay a tapestry woven from their reflections, each thread representing lifetimes of silent whispers between lovers, her pattern repeating across time's fabric, as though reflection's surface was the needle, and Alias and Thomas were mere pawns in an infinite game where love played both master and partner. As they stood rooted to this ground that only reflected without discrimination, it seemed that their destinies had always been drawn along these sacred shores, their timeless ballet of souls finding solace within the mirror's waters under morning's embrace, when reflections held them together as Alias and Thomas stood side by side on that tranquil shore where time seemed to both stand still and flow like a gentle stream. They felt as though their souls had always been intertwined with this sacred place or liminal space between the world of flesh and water. It was here, amidst reflection's embrace, that dawn's first light, that destiny whispered secrets through ripples on the surface. Each one carried a tale, an echo from another era, where their ancestors had stood in similar silence before Alias or Thomas, gazing into waters just as they were doing now. In this eternal ballet of souls across centuries and tides, love's embrace was timeless or constant, that remained unaltered by the ebb and flow of human existence around it. The couple could feel a warm connection to all those who had been drawn here before them. Their spirits resonated in an ancient harmony, as if each soul's reflection within reflection held pieces of themselves, revealing not just one's face, but also memories etched into the very essence of being, or shared history that transcended lifetimes. Alias reached out and traced a finger across the cool water where his hand met Thomas' palm, both feeling an unspoken understanding as they contemplated their reflections before them. These were not mere images, but rather vessels of past loves and connections that had traversed reflection's depth. They knew in this moment there was no need for words, when all the knowledge between hearts could be communicated through shared glances, a silent dialogue woven with threads as intricate as any tapestry crafted by hands or mind or mirror to their souls, that stretched back into an endless loop of time. The couple's thoughts were interrupted not by the sounds above, but rather by distant melodies carried on the breeze, songs hummed from a world beyond reflections, shores where history had unfolded in tales as old and complex as their own reflections. These tunes seemed to encapsulate emotions they both knew too well, longing for something more than just shared moments, but also an understanding of the deeper connection that bound them. As morning light filtered through reflection's waters, it cast a golden glow on Alias and Thomas, like molten gold being poured into molds shaped by their spirits. They felt as though this place was where love itself had been tempered in flame stronger for enduring the heat of time. And here, amidst these sacred tides, destiny unfolded its delicate wings to guide them through a dance that transcended mere mortal comprehension. Suddenly Alias felt an embrace from Thomas, sighed as if their souls had collided in this space between worlds, a reunion of energies rooting the couple firm within reflection's touch, making them feel less like strangers and more akin to kin bound by fate. In that instant they knew beyond doubt that every love reflected upon these waters was but one thread among many. Together their reflections formed an ongoing legacy, where past loves had whispered promises of eternal bonds into the ears of those who would listen across generations, or continuum unbroken since time immemorial. With each breath drawn in harmony with nature's own rhythm, Alias and Thomas understood that every reflection they beheld was an opportunity to look beyond themselves, a chance not only for personal revelation, but also the understanding of their place within reflection's ever-changing yet timeless story. They could see how each soul had come seeking solace in these very waters, where secrets untold were guarded by depth and whispering ways of sacred trust between lovers, to keep hidden tales safe beneath a watchful sky that bore witness through countless storms like this one. As Alias' gaze returned from the water's surface back up into his partner, he saw not just Thomas but also echoes of past loves in every curve and liner mosaic, where each reflection held a piece to puzzles left unsolved through generations who had come before them. It was here, at reflection's shore, that the couple realized their own reflections were as much about discovery as they were about connection. For within these depths, Alias and Thomas could find not just themselves, but also each other in ways words never could convey, or history ever recorded, or silent conversation etched into every shimmering ripple. And now, with the sun climbing higher in a sky that promised more secrets to unveil yet, still held their reflections as evidence of an enduring love